You're listening to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast, powered by Watson Estates. The most successful local real estate investing starts right here, right now. Here's your host, broker, investor, and social media influencer, Bradley Watson.
Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates. It is the middle of the month, June 15th, 2020. What a beautiful day it is, and a wonderful day to catch up on Toronto real estate. Thank you for tuning in to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast. We are #1 on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts for your Toronto real estate news. And it's been a joy connecting with you every single day. I think we're actually hitting 2 months. If not, we've just hit 2 months of doing daily podcasts. I hope you guys are getting value of the content. If so, please jump over to our platform, specifically on iTunes or on YouTube. Leave us comments, leave us reviews. Thank you. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for sharing in the story as the pandemic happens and all the news. It's been a wonderful journey. And today, we have some great stuff. We're going to start off talking about this article that came out of the Toronto Sun, and the question is, did the pandemic put the strength of the TO real estate market on display? And now there's a lot more questions, and we're starting to see this dialogue changing of what's happening in our marketplace, pretty much saying now that we have ourselves a wonderful market. Earlier last week, we had a lot of doom and gloom news. Later in the week was a little bit more of a little bit more brightness in the news. And so this article was kind of an opinion piece. And I want to talk about what exactly we're seeing in the market. What is the feel of what's been going on in and around me here as an investor and a realtor in the GTA. And then we're going to talk about, I saw an article came out of Forbes, and I thought this was an appropriate time to bring it up because they asked the question, why is immigration fundamental to the success of Toronto's market? We've heard a lot of news about immigration being affected. To what extent is to be determined, but we have seen some estimates. And so what does immigration or a change to immigration mean for our prices, whether that's on the rental side or on the buying and selling side? And then as we transition, we're going to talk about, will the tanking rental market, and it is tanking, lead to forced selling? This question of, okay, so we've got ourselves a really good market, right? We're sitting in a very comfortable position. We've seen a very solid rebound, a lot of confidence. We haven't seen a lot of forced selling, and we've seen a very balanced months of inventory relative to, the number of sales versus the number of new listings, and things are going really good. But could this question of what's going to come next? Could something come that devastates our market? And one area that could happen would be in the rental market. And there's an article about that we're going to cover. So some great stuff today, some news, great or otherwise. We've got some news. And so my whole objective today is to share with you what I'm seeing, the news that I'm reading as I'm learning and dissecting the market myself, and sharing some of my thoughts as well as some of the thoughts of our viewers. And actually on that note, just yesterday, I received a comment from Jay Barber on YouTube, and it made me chuckle. There was a video we did not even that long ago, probably in the last couple months, called How to Win Multiple Offers. And there was a comment. He said, 301, he said, guess the guys didn't trim it. So he called us out because in that video, if you guys want to jump over there just to laugh at it, go for it. I don't mind laughing at myself. So what I did is when I do those edited videos, so every so often I need to make a cut, right? Because it's like, cut this, cut that. So I have an editor that does those cuts, and I had to sneeze. I was feeling a sense of sneezing in that moment, but I'm like, this is a good video, so we're gonna keep going. So I say in the video, I literally say at the 3-minute mark, hey guys, cut this part out. And they did it. They did it. Thank goodness for a podcast, because I literally have my hands in the air right now. I talk with my hands, and so doing a video, you can't just talk with your hands flailing in the air. You look silly. So you can get a little bit more serious out here, a little more, actually less serious, a little more lighthearted. And I think it's been good. I've been enjoying having this kind of long form, being able to share my mind and share my opinions on what's been going on in our market. So let's jump into that, okay? We're going to go into a Toronto Sun article here. And this was written, it says, pandemic puts strength of TO real estate market on display. Here's the article. For anyone who has been following Toronto real estate over the course of the pandemic, it may come as a surprise to hear the increasingly popular theory that the worst is likely over, and shockingly, that the Toronto market appears to have emerged largely unscathed. If you've missed the last few podcasts we've done, this has been the case, right? Like we've seen pretty much no, like where's the damage? Where's the injury? Where's the fallout? Where's the crash? Where is it? Even with less than half of the inventory, the average sale price for the GTA has risen. It went up. I mean, we had an 8 to 10% drop, right? Month over month, but yet we're still, and it kind of led to a flat pricing, but we haven't gone down. In fact, it rose 3% the same month last year. That means that even with a global pandemic, turmoil in the economy, record unemployment, and an industry shutdown to contend with, the Toronto real estate market has held. Some analysts suggest that this is further proof of its seemingly eternal strength and resiliency. Okay, let's not say it's eternally strong and eternally resilient, but we definitely have a backlog of demand, that this issue that has not been addressed for at least, where were we now? I'm trying to think, at least probably 10 years now. I'm going to say 8 to 10 years at least. We have had a serious crunch, a serious tightness of buyer demand relative to sellers. Now, where that comes from, I mean, you be the judge, right? This is where we got to read our news and see where that's coming from. Is it local? Is it international? Is it investors? Is it people buying for their own primary residence? Where they're coming from? What are these people groups buying? I don't know. First-time buyers, versus people selling and downsizing to retirement. Regardless, we have a booming market that not even COVID-19, not even a global shutdown can slow down our market. Even with Ontario still only partially reopened, buyers are back. Property showings have almost doubled. We talked about that on Saturday. The average, if you missed our Saturday podcast, by the way, oftentimes people don't listen to podcasts on the weekends. I know you guys got to get this groove where you listen from Monday to Friday, and that's fine. I like to put content on Saturday for the listeners who do listen, but if you missed it, there was a lot of big news came out on Friday. So go back and listen to our Saturday podcast after this one, of course. Go back, take a listen, because we have seen a huge increase in the number of showings, and the average number of days on market is back on track, and houses are selling, though not at the pre-pandemic pace, of course. What is most needed is more inventory. Buyers are looking, now comfortable with donating masks and gloves for showings, and likely spurred on by record low mortgage rates. Even bidding wars have returned. And we've seen these, guys. We've seen them. Maybe not to the same caliber. We now have bidding wars coming back. And the way people are pricing their properties, they are now pricing for multiple offers again. Surprise. The question was, at the very beginning, my question, I wanted to know this. I had an idea, and my hypothesis was correct, was will buyers come back first or will sellers come back first? Because we saw this pullback, right? We saw this pullback, and where all of a sudden, yes, you've got, what is it? Well, we saw a 60% drop, 60% drop on both sides, right? The question was, are buyers going to come back first or are sellers? And I suspected buyers would come back first, just by nature of it being such a strong buyer market historically in Toronto. And that is the case, right? Because if sellers came back first, we'd have a bit of a problem. In fact, there were sellers on the market who actually did the opposite. They pulled their properties off because they thought, well, to hell with giving a discount. I don't need to give a discount. This is Toronto. This is Toronto, damn it. So the big question, will this upward trend continue, or is it simply the rally before the true correction? And this is to be forecasted. This is where there's the great unknown. In fact, some of the big forecasts on where there'll be a dip has happened in the second half of 2020 now. So everyone's kind of been kicking that concern down the road. And the reason for that is the bailouts, right? Like the amount of money, the CERB, mortgage deferrals. But as these things unwind, if they unwind, whenever that is, will that mean a pullback? And assuming they all just drop, like in their current form, then I would agree. You're going to see a pullback. Even the people that are most strong advocates for our market agree there will be some sense of a pullback. The question is how much? And that uncertainty is why you have such a huge range in the forecast. Now, the thing is if you throw more money at it, if you keep putting out more bailouts, you keep allowing further deferrals and allowing further CERB, and more money is being thrown at businesses, then maybe the train continues. And maybe we're talking in early 2021, wherever that happens. But in the meantime, if we get a slingshot of prices, then the The real issue here is the psychology, right? The psychology of consumers. This is what we saw in 2017. Foreign buyers didn't make up a whole big part of our market. Yet you say, no more foreign buyers. We're going to put this property. We even saw a pullback, by the way, of foreign buyers. We've seen a steady decline of foreign buyers since 2017, since that all happened. And yet things rebounded really quickly because people realized, well, maybe it was just in my head. Okay, let's move along. Unemployment is at record levels. Entire sectors of the workforce are still on standby, waiting to return to their jobs, and temporary measures intended to cushion the blow are still in place. Canada's COVID-19 emergency benefits are still paying out. We've got $200 billion with a B worth of Canadian mortgage payments have been deferred. And we've seen the deferral numbers racking up because we've seen the borrowing amounts racking up. Everything's just kind of being pushed till later. Let me know actually in the comments below, how many of you guys are actually deferring your mortgage? Like, are you guys using that program? I'm wondering, I mean, we've got a lot, 200 billion is a lot, but I'm curious, as investors, are there any investors out there that have properties or rental properties that are applying this? Or have you guys mostly come up against roadblocks because they're rental properties? I'm curious. Anyways, what comes when the stimulus money stops flowing? Will that be when the true economic impacts of the pandemic are finally realized and when the real estate market should brace for impact? This guy said, my thinking is no, probably not. And as the news becomes more optimistic about growth, right, price increases, I think you're going to have more people saying no. I think to say no right now is a little premature. I do personally believe there's going to be further deferrals. There's going to be further money. People, I think that's going to happen. So, but to say no right now, I still think is a little short-sighted. As soon as we hear, okay, these programs are going to continue, then I'll be like, okay, yeah, no, we're kicking this can so far down the road. We've been saying this. Demand is super high in Toronto. If you guys don't remember, let me refresh your memory. Before COVID-19, being a buyer in Toronto, in the GTA, sucked. It sucked. Bidding wars like crazy, prices going through the roof. You want to be holding properties. You don't want to be looking for a property, but yet people were looking for a property because they wanted to be people that were holding properties. You jump in, both feet into the water of the real estate market, and 2 months later you think, you know what, maybe I need to sell because the amount of money I just made on my property is outrageous. Guys, this is the market we were in. This is why even when you put a little bit of a little tampering of something as small and easily contracted as COVID-19, even when you put that in the system, you see the resiliency of our market. Buyers are willing to assume the risk because there's zero doubt that in the mid to long term, this will just be a blip in property values. You guys be the judge. I know you guys have your own angles. You have your own perspectives. We're looking for buying opportunities along the way. I get it, right? Now is a buying opportunity. Okay. If you're building a portfolio, I mean, I always think buying opportunities are always the time to buy. Like, I don't know why we should be selling. If you're building a portfolio, that is, if you're moving, then sell, right? But your fees all happen on the selling side. So we should be buying when there's a deal to be happening. Anyways, that's the market. That was an opinion piece from the Toronto Sun. And it's up to you guys. Make your investments accordingly. This is what we're seeing. And I anticipate, by the way, that this week we're going to have some more good news and we're going to have some more bad news. Right? And we're going to talk about some of the news to come out later in the week that we're going to be watching. But there is going to be room for bad news this week. Okay? Just accept we're going to see both. And not everybody is all in on either side. All right. Let's talk about immigration. Let's move on here because we know immigration is one of these big things that need to be considered. And on the downside, immigration has been hit quite substantially. The question is immigration good? Like, are we fair to assume that it creates strength in the Toronto real estate market? So here's an article came out from Forbes, no small publication. Canada's stance on immigration has long since set it apart from comparable economies. Compared to the US, Canada welcomes 3 times as many immigrants on a per capita basis. That translates to approximately 340,000 immigrants per year. Now, you guys will remember, hopefully, I've said this before, but if not, just remember, when the election happened, when we had a liberal conservative election back in, I don't know when this was. It feels like forever ago, but it wasn't even that long, probably a year ago. Whatever. Political people are probably like, what the hell? I don't track it that closely. Anyways, remember, both liberals and conservatives wanted to increase immigration. Both. This is not a partisan issue. Both parties, both sides agree immigration is important to our economy. Okay. Following the coronavirus outbreak, the U.S. signed an executive order suspending immigration, whereas in Canada, Keeping with historical tendencies, Canada will continue to welcome a steady flow of newcomers into the country. The article says this: though the coronavirus pandemic has stalled Canada's economy as a whole, immigration remains a dependable fundamental of Toronto's economy, effectively fueling the multifamily market and making Toronto one of the best cities for investment in Ontario. Immigration drives population gains, contributes to the workforce, and ensures a healthy tension between housing supply and demand. Healthy in the sense of demand pressures, by the way. This is the reason prices are going up. Moreover, migration to Canada shows no signs of slowing down. This article came out yesterday, guys. Don't think, well, you didn't hear the stats because we only got like 60,000 coming to the GTA instead of 100,000. And actually, that might be an Ontario stat. Anyways, the numbers are down quite a bit. I think it was like 40%. Regardless, this article is saying there's no signs of slowing down. This is a little blip on the radar. So here's some of the policies. This article is good, teaches me stuff too. Why is Canada's immigration policy so different? Why is it so high? Here's some of the reasons. Number one, Canada has a parliamentary system of government. This means that a federal political party holding a majority has significant control over the country's policies, which is different than the states, right? In the states, they've got a president, they got Congress, they got Senate, and it can be more policy gridlock. So we can get things out quicker. Under Canada's constitution, provinces and territories are able to authorize and manage their own immigration programs, which is different in the states. The states don't have that authority. Canada is still currently accepting and approving applications for permanent residencies despite the pandemic. In fact, there was a 2020 to 2022 immigration levels plan, which was announced in March, and it indicated that Canada will be welcoming more than 1 million new permanent residents over the next 3 years. Now, whether they hit that target, we'll see. I don't think they'll hit that target, but they have a plan, in fact, a new temporary plan to boost immigration. They are working around the clock to keep the numbers up. We are more lenient on immigration even now. Visa and border measures have been put in place in lieu. So there's actually been, they've made it easier. If anything, we've made it easier because of COVID, because we don't want there to be a reason for people to not come here. There's already enough of a reason to not come here. Toronto is the fastest growing city in all of North America, which we saw that, and they're forecasted to hit in Toronto 8 million within the next 10 years. So that's this article. Big stuff, man. So here, immigration in GTA by the numbers. Check out some of these numbers. So we know why we can pass it so quick, but what are the numbers? 21% of homes in Canada are purchased by immigrants. Okay, that is 1/5 of our housing market. These aren't foreign buyers. These aren't people that are throwing their money halfway across the ocean, right? I guess it would be fully across the ocean, not halfway across the ocean. If you go halfway across the ocean, you're going to land somewhere in the Pacific, right? These are newcomers to Canada spending approximately 3 years in Canada before buying a home, with 75% arriving in Canada with funds allocated to purchase a home. So we don't have a bunch of poor people coming to our country and bogging down our system. 75% of them, when they come, have money to buy a property. They've got money set aside. They're ready to do it. You know who's getting hurt the most by this is the rentals, because that 3-month period, arriving, learning about the city, feeling the love from fellow Torontonians before investing, that period right now is getting hurt, right? The rental market is getting hurt. It is estimated that newcomers will buy 680,000 homes in Canada over the next 5 years. The GTA is home to 45% of Ontario's population, and it welcomes 77% of the province's newcomers. So here's the thing. Ontario is like the home to immigration. And in Ontario, the GTA is the home of Ontario of immigration. So this is the place to be, guys, the Greater Toronto Area. In the last 20 years, Ontario has been home to about 52% of the international immigrants who have come to Canada in total. So Ontario makes up more than half. So good luck finding a second place there, because you're not going to find a first place when we're already over half. As we recuperate, this is how they kind of close this article. This idea, this is looking at it from a business perspective. As we recuperate from the coronavirus pandemic, high rates of immigration will be something of a saving grace for the real estate market on a regional and national scales. For those hoping to invest in the GTA, now is as good a time as ever, as any. Annual immigration numbers are forecasted to rise. Demand for housing is growing and new supply is underway. The article did talk about new supply, but I didn't think it was going to add too much relevance here. So we have growth. They are fueling, what in this article, the multifamily markets, but there's a ton of immigration coming here with money, and they are going to be what saves our market. Now, right now, you're feeling it in the rental market, but the question will be in a second, will that translate into our last point, which is the possibility of it affecting prices because people are forced to sell now that immigration and therefore rentals is falling down pretty quickly, by the way. Just a side article, I noticed actually there was one from the Vancouver Sun talking about the idea of, so the article is called Number of Chinese Students in Canada Plunges by 44%. Before we talk about rentals, let's listen to why. The number of people from China nosedived that are going for study permits in Canada by 44% in the first 4 months of the year. So, and you might think, oh, well, I mean, the article's from Vancouver and, you know, they all go to Vancouver. Guys, listen to these numbers. In the GTA last year, Greater Toronto, there was a temporary home to 53,000 students from China. Vancouver had 34,000. There are more people coming from mainland China to Ontario, to the GTA, to study than there is people going to Vancouver. So we are the most affected group. We are the most affected city by this plunging student study permit, whatever, going halfway across the ocean to study. And so this is affecting our rental market, right? And so this brings me to another article that comes from the Huffington Post. And I want to ask the question, and the article doesn't go too far, but it touches it a little bit, and we're going to kind of pick it up. When we're kind of looking at our market, we see a lot of stability right now, right? So the next thing that we need to be watching is, well, what happens in the second half of 2020? Because the first half is pretty much done, right? Like we're coming to the end of it. The stats are going to be pretty decent, in my opinion, in June. So what happens in the next half? What happens when things start changing? And now you've got yet another month of rentals not being filled because people are either not coming here to live or they're not wanting to move, you know, or people aren't paying rent. So even if it does open up again, are these going to be people who have been kind of kicked out when the evictions are open up? That's the other thing. I think I've heard like there's 50,000 potential evictions lined up for people who haven't been paying rent that are just being backlogged and because they're not allowed to evict them now, but don't think they're not going to evict them later. And they're going to happen in mass numbers. That could cause more of a problem. And generally speaking, regulation has indirect consequences. And that one definitely is going to have an indirect consequence. And the government's even lining it up to kick them out even easier. That's a whole other story. Okay. Rising house prices and tanking rental markets show pandemic's economic divide. Here's the key point. Rental rates across Canada have fallen for 3 straight months and are down 7.8% on average from before the pandemic. And this was according to a rentals.ca report this week. We talked about that as that happened. So rent rates are dropping very fast. In some areas, I think there was we saw an article, I think it was $450 drop or something in that one zone. So here's a quote. Tenants have been more dramatically impacted by pandemic-related job loss than homeowners and are not currently looking for apartments or other rental accommodations. This sharp drop in demand has resulted in landlords dropping their asking rents in most major markets across the country. So they made a very interesting point in this article and one that I never really thought of, okay? There's so many angles to all of this. So as new stuff kind of comes out, it's good to wrap our head around it. So here's one of the points that they made. The people on the lower rungs of the income ladder, they're struggling more. People that are, frontline workers, essential workers, people that have maybe blue collar jobs that have been laid off, production companies, whatever. They are obviously more impacted than the guy sitting in a cushy office and able to now make write-offs on his personal residence because he's working from home. The middle and upper classes have not been affected at the same levels as the low income. We've seen that in statistics. So therefore, those are the individuals most likely to have rental properties. Now, there's a lot that can't afford even to cover rent unless they're kind of grouped up or whatever. But generally speaking, renters are people who are in the lower to middle class, right? Or just getting started that are now most vulnerable by COVID-19. And this has led to a drop-off in demand. Not to mention the supply crisis that we have because of Airbnbs. So there's a lot of pressure right now on rentals. Larger cities have been hit particularly hard. Rents per square foot have dropped steeply in Toronto since the pandemic and are now down, here's Toronto, guys, 9.5% below their levels from a year ago. That's almost a 10% drop in 1 year per square foot rent. Big problems. Big problems. The story lately has been the lack of overall inventory. For the year to date, a downward trend in pricing has already been corrected. Even now, most properties are ripe for bidding wars. So they go on to talk about how on the selling side, which we kind of covered, things are doing good, right? The market is solid. The market is very strong. The fundamentals are strong. And by fundamentals, I mean there's a ridiculous amount of demand. Not so much on the rental market. So then they start to bridge this gap. Will the barrier break? But the divide between the rental and housing markets could soon break down. That's because a significant chunk of Canada's homes, particularly condos, is in the hands of investors who rely on the rental market to pay their mortgages. A recent report from TorontoRentals.com found that units in many of Toronto's new condo buildings are losing money at current rental rates. So if, let's say, you bought a unit relatively recently, you paid a nice high price tag, you might have even known you were going to take a bit of a price drop, a bit of a loss month over month. But now rents are coming down if you can even find a tenant. And if you want to find a tenant, you got to take a haircut. So the question is how many people can pull that off and for how long? Like, I would even suggest, if you are an investor, whether you're in rental properties or not, even if it's a primary residence, we should all be hoping, unless you're a renter, in which case you want a discount, but we should all be hoping that we can get more stability in the rental market, because this could pose a problem. Even if you don't have rental properties, it could spiral, guys. So we got to keep our eye on this. We definitely need to keep our eye on this. Forecast. So there was a forecast from these two economists that a 10% drop in the tenant house price index over the next year, which would make it a steepest one-year drop in Canadian house prices in decades. And that was actually talking about what they said here. I don't know why they took those economists, because there have been far stronger forecasts. But we have seen some very substantial forecasts for price drops, most of which have been led from unemployment and immigration. But sure, let's spin it this way and say also you could have an issue that spirals out of these challenges we're facing in the rental sphere. Now, I saw this really fun article before I kind of talk about some of the big stuff we're looking to this week for news. There was an article that talked about Liberals look at buying distressed buildings to save stock of affordable housing. You guys remember a little while back, there was this little plan called the Liberals National Housing Strategy, where they plan to create 150,000 affordable units over 10 years. That sounds like a little plan. Well, they've been able to replace at half the speed that we're losing them. So we have a huge outflow of affordable housing. It's ridiculous. So this article is talking about how the federal government is now considering purchasing those assets as part of its next phase of government response. So it'll be interesting to see if the government starts buying up affordable housing, because the national housing strategy to help affordable housing is failing. We're going the other direction. So let's wait and see. So here's some of the big news, guys. It's going to be a great week for info. The Canadian Real Estate Association is going to be releasing home sales for May on Monday, which is today. So we should get those numbers. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And CMHC is releasing the mortgage and consumer credit trends. So there's been a lot of talk about credit, right? This is the idea of deferrals. And CMHC has been very hard on our market, and that there's been severe risks. We've seen what the banks are doing, but it'll be interesting to see what the numbers say as they release this Thursday. So there's some really good stuff. This week is going to be great. And we'll keep doing these daily podcasts. We'll keep them going where I can speak my mind. I don't have to worry about edits. I can just, pick my nose at least 4 times without you noticing, but yet have fun along the way and give some great content and learn some stuff. And I'm learning too. It's been a fun journey. Enjoy the rest of your day. Please leave us a review on iTunes. I know we're number 1, but you know what's harder than becoming number 1? It's staying there. So I'm going to need some help staying there. If you guys want to leave us a review, leave us a comment, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning with more. Take care and keep it real.